Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Burn the Rollbook podcast. This is the podcast where we break down everything you were never taught about menopause, mental health, and relationships one truth at a time. I'm Rachel Boyle, a licensed couples therapist, sex therapist, and certified menopause specialist. This podcast helps you understand what is actually happening to your body, mind, and relationships, and gives you real tools to move through life with clarity, calm, and connection. Let's get started. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Burn the Rollbook podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about, is it perimenopause or ADHD, and why those two makes everything a little bit harder. So if you're in perimenopause and you suddenly can't focus, you can't remember words, maybe you feel more irritable than you've ever been in your relationship, and it feels like everything is just hitting a little harder. For women, the question becomes, is it perimenopause? Is it anxiety? Is it burnout? Or is it ADHD that went undiagnosed and that nobody caught? So today we're talking about the messy overlap between perimenopause, ADHD, especially late diagnosed ADHD in women, and why perimenopause can be the moment that long-standing coping strategies just stop working. So first, let's start off with talking about why women get later diagnoses than men do. So reality check. There are quite a few people out there with ADHD diagnoses. It's not rare to be diagnosed with ADHD. But the problem is that women are not getting accurately diagnosed in younger years when they're in their childhood or teen years like boys are. And so there are some reasons that women are getting missed. And the first main reason is that ADHD in girls presents differently than in boys. So in girls, they're less disruptive. They don't have so much of the hyperactive piece that boys do. Girls, on average, internalize their ADHD symptoms. So if it happens in girls, it's also happening with you as an adult. So internalized symptoms can create things like anxiety, perfectionism, rumination, and depression. So ADHD doesn't get considered because of the internal nature of ADHD for a lot of women. Also, women tend to mask ADHD more than men do. So what does that mean? Well, masking means that they've found ways to cope with the ADHD so that it's not being recognized that they may have it. And one of these coping strategies could be being very highly organized in order to manage the ADHD symptoms. So what I want you to know is that a large portion of the population, especially women, go undiagnosed. And then whenever they hit perimenopause, it becomes a breaking point, kind of like the rug has been pulled out from under you and all the things that you've done all the years to help your life run mostly smoothly now are no longer working. So the reasons for this, there's a few. So the first that you hear me talk about a lot is that perimenopause impacts every area of your body and your brain. So it really impacts your sleep, your mood, your cognition. So even without ADHD, women would report brain fog, word finding issues, and that they're not able to tolerate as much stress. They get irritated a lot more easily. And so what this does is your executive functioning demands of life, they don't get easier as you get older. They typically get a little harder, especially whenever you're in your 40s. So you're likely still managing your work at a high level, parenting, caregiving, and doing the bulk of the mental and emotional load in a relationship if you're in a heterosexual relationship. And if you've compensated for ADHD with effort and structure and over organization, perimenopause it takes away the buffer that you normally have. So when this happens, it's kind of like your world starts to fall apart. And also, since women often experience a delay in getting proper diagnoses, they don't know that this is happening. So if perimenopause is the first time you feel like you really can't hold it together, it may be because it's not just perimenopause, but the perimenopause has exposed something that's been there all along. your whole life that you were unaware of. So let's talk about when ADHD gets unmasked in midlife and what you can do to get help. There's increasing clinical attention to the idea that hormonal fluctuations, especially estrogen, interacts with your neurotransmitters like dopamine, and this interaction can influence ADHD symptoms and mood. Now, this is true throughout your whole life. So if you go back to like puberty and, your early 20s, there can be times during your cycle where you're going to feel a lot more together and be able to deal with life better than other times in your cycle. Also, in the UK, they have clinical guidance documents that describe declining estrogen during menopause and how that it can impact attention, emotional regulation, organizational skills, and memories, areas that already tend to be vulnerable for people with ADHD. And perimenopause can make ADHD symptoms feel more severe. So just take that in for a moment. Like perimenopause is already hard enough for a lot of women. Women with ADHD, it's going to feel a little worse. So many high functioning women have masked their ADHD for decades. And now in perimenopause, the scaffolding has been removed. Your sleep's gotten worse. Your stress is increased. Your hormones are shifting and your responsibilities have peaked. And suddenly your coping strategies are not working. So the tricky bit is trying to decide, is this perimenopause or is this ADHD? Because they have some of the same symptoms like forgetfulness, distractibility, poor concentration, irritability, emotional reactivity, and sleep disruption, which is one of the main things that people complain about in perimenopause because it's really terrible. You can also have low motivation, shutdown, and overwhelm, anxiety, and rumination. Now, clues that it may be ADHD and not just perimenopause is if you can trace some of these patterns back to childhood and adolescence. So if you've had issues with sleep since you were younger, inconsistent performance, trouble starting things and finishing things, chronic procrastination, losing things, disorganization. You might rely on urgency or pressure to initiate tasks, especially tasks that you don't want to be doing. You can go from feeling bored or understimulated to overactivated, and you might find it hard to find your calmness. Also, women with ADHD, they tend to feel things a lot more intensely. So they tend to have more peaks and valleys than people who don't have ADHD. Now, the thing is that a lot of times this presents as anxiety or depression. And the thing is that if you've got ADHD and it's not anxiety or depression, then there's different treatment modalities for that. So it's important to know whether or not it's ADHD or perimenopause. So if it's ADHD, you're going to be able to start tracking some of the stuff back to childhood and adolescence. And what I really want you to start looking at is if you enjoy doing something, how easy is it for you to lose track of time? How easy is it for you to get absorbed in doing things? So typically people with ADHD, when they find something that they like to do, it's like they can be insatiable with it. On the flip side of that, how hard is it for you to do something that you really don't want to do? And that could be that procrastination thing. So like maybe you procrastinate when it comes to doing taxes, or you procrastinate when it comes to doing a task that really isn't very hard, but it's just you don't want to do it. So for people with ADHD, it's like trying to push a boulder up a hill. There's feels like more internal resistance than people who don't have ADHD. Now, relationally, this can impact your relationship, right? Because if you don't know you have ADHD and your partner doesn't know that you have ADHD, then you can come across as more irritable, snappier. You can say things in a more volatile way because your system that you've used to regulate yourself isn't really working anymore. And so what I want you to know that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It's not a character issue. It's really often an issue of capacity, meaning how much can your brain really process in these difficult moments? So there's two key things that I'm going to talk about that are going to really help you with your relationship. First off, I want you to start naming the capacity shift. And this might sound something like, my body and my brain are changing right now and I'm working on it, but my capacity is so much lower and I need us to build a plan together instead of arguing and blaming each other. Okay, the second thing I want you to do is to shift from expecting your partner to know what you want to telling them what you want. So an example like that is you could have fewer conversations that start off, why are you like this? Versus directed problem-solving conversations of what do we do at 6 p.m. when everybody's fried and tired and we still have to get dinner on the table and help the kids with their homework. Put in a functional plan for the two of you guys to work together. And this can really help if you start having conversations around who's doing what in the house, and that your partner can take on more of that mental and emotional load if it's currently not very balanced in your relationship. So what I want you to know is that whenever this happens, it's important to try not to judge yourself and to know that it's not you being lazy. It's just a capacity issue. And it's also neurobiology and physiology. Like your brain is literally reorganizing itself during perimenopause. And if you've got ADHD, you've got a brain that's neurodivergent, meaning that your brain works a little differently than a neurotypical brain does. And so it's not something that's just going to go away because your brain literally is working differently. Now, something that's going to be super, super important for you is to get some sleep. You've got to prioritize your sleep, because if you're not prioritizing your sleep and doing things for sleep hygiene, all of this is just going to get worse. So the first thing that I want you to do is to find a really good ADHD specialist. I want you to find a specialist that specifically works with women in ADHD, because it's important that you get an accurate diagnosis. Because once you get an accurate diagnosis, you can start to get some tools that you can start using to help with the ADHD. And you also need a really good women's sexual health specialist, a doctor that's well-versed in perimenopause and menopause and working with your estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, so that you can start feeling a little more like yourself. And having these conversations with your partner is going to be super important so that the two of you are on the same page, creating a plan together about how to go forward now that you've gotten a proper diagnosis and that you're going through this perimenopause. Because going through perimenopause, it's going to change who you are. You're not going to be the same person once you get through this. So those conversations with your partner are going to be super, super important. So if this episode hit home, take one next step. Track your symptoms for a couple of weeks to see if they're cyclical or to see if there's something that's brand new. Prioritize your sleep as a core intervention and bring this data to your clinician, who hopefully is well-trained and understands perimenopausal women. And if you're in a relationship, make this a we problem to solve, not a you problem to fight about. Thanks for spending time with me today. I hope you found something helpful, validating, or just a little more human in our conversation. Remember, while I'm a licensed therapist, I'm not your therapist, and I'm not a medical doctor. This podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical or mental health advice. For personalized care, please consult with a licensed healthcare provider or mental health professional trained in the area you're seeking support. You deserve expert guidance that's tailored just for you.